Welcome into the Sports Objective, the Inside Slant. I'm Dave Richmond, along with that guy right there on the top right corner. Ladies and gentlemen, the only one from the group, I guess, of us that's home right now. Hey, Kyle from LaGrange, how are you, man?
What's going on, Dave? Yes, I am at the Chateau Barber, if you will, broadcasting live.
Sounds good, brother. Appreciate you tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. Bubba, we got a great show, and you outdone yourself this week for the group. I'm just excited we have college football. How about you?
Yeah, 8 games a week ago, only 6 on Saturday. This week we have 22 games, and with 21 of those being tomorrow. And one of those games taking place tomorrow is Louisville, Western Kentucky. And right now we're very excited to welcome in from the Louisville Courier Journal, Cameron Teague-Robinson. Cameron, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Great to have you. Very exciting to have college football. Just want to get your take on things. And obviously, I know with being a writer, you're excited to have a game to write about, right?
Yeah. It's always nice to cover football and have a job and cover sports again. So I'm all in for it for sure.
So the Cardinals. Go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead.
Okay. The Cardinals open up tomorrow with the Hilltoppers of Western Kentucky. Somewhat of a rivalry there. I'm sure Louisville does not want to claim it as a rivalry, but from Western Kentucky's standpoint, obviously they like to beat the Cardinals. So to talk about a little bit of the history of the game and how does Louisville view Western Kentucky?
Yeah. Louisville's won the last 12 games. I think 2018 when Louisville was 2-10. That was a good game. I mean, Louisville almost lost that game. Louisville handled them pretty well last year. I think they were up 31-7 at halftime. Their quarterback, they came in with a backup quarterback starting because their starting quarterback got hurt. And it was Mikhail Cunningham who started that game. And he got hurt in the second half. So Louisville kind of just ran the ball out to kind of stay healthy the rest of the way. But I think this would be a good matchup. You have two really experienced teams. Mikhail Cunningham, who I mentioned before, was back. Will start at quarterback for Louisville. Western brings back a ton of talent on defense. I think they have an NFL caliber defensive end in D'Angelo Malone. So I think it'd be a good game. I think Louisville should win it, but I think it would still be a pretty good game.
Yeah, no doubt.
Cameron, before we really dive into this year's matchup, just talk about that Louisville program, such a tremendous turnaround in year one of Scott Satterfield, somebody that we're very familiar with, being a podcast based out of the state of North Carolina and everything he did at App State. But just talk about the turnaround thus far.
Yeah, he's gotten those players to really buy into what he was preaching very early on. And I mean, they have a ton of talent offensively. I mean, I mentioned Mikhail Cunningham, but they have an All-American in Tutu Atwell who runs a 4.23 40-yard dash almost. They have another NFL caliber receiver in Desmond Patrick. They have an All-American caliber running back in Javian Hawkins, one of the best kick returners in the country in Hassan Hall. I mean, they have so many weapons on offense. I think the key for them, if they want to make the ACC championship game this year, is going to be defensively. They were improved last year from 2018, but still not great. I think if they can take a step forward this year, they bring back 8 starters. Their entire linebacking core is back. So if they can take a step forward, I think they have a really good shot to win 9, maybe 10 games this season.
And do you feel like that's the expectation is to compete for a division title and to try to make the championship game in year 2 under Satterfield?
Yeah, I do. Especially when you saw the schedule, especially when the COVID schedule came out. You avoided Clemson, who was originally on the schedule. Don't play North Carolina, who I in my preseason poll I picked those 2 teams 1 and 2. So you avoid those 2 teams. You have to play Notre Dame and you have to play Miami. But I think with that schedule, the offense you have, and the expectation that the defense takes a step forward, I think they're hoping to be in Charlotte in December to playing. I think who everybody assumes will be Clemson in the ACC championship game.
Now, is that Notre Dame game in South Bend or is it in Louisville?
It's in South Bend.
It's in South Bend. Okay. And before we get into breaking down the Western Kentucky game, what is the attendance policy for the Cards as of game 1?
Yeah, they're doing 20%. So Cardinal Stadium holds about a little over 60,000. So they will have a little over 12,000 tomorrow.
Okay, so your governor, and I know the state of Kentucky has a very popular Democratic governor, actually, which is kind of surprising that Kentucky is a Democratic governored state. So he's allowing you guys to do 20%. That's good to hear.
Yeah, I think Louisville's doing 20%. I believe Western and University of Kentucky are doing 20% as well.
Okay, good deal. So, talk about the game tomorrow against the Hilltoppers. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Expected a good competition, two experienced ball teams. Western Kentucky went to a bowl last year. So, what do you expect tomorrow from that ball game?
Yeah, and I think the one thing is kind of ironic is that when you think about football right now in the COVID era, I think you expect many teams to be kind of rusty, right? Because they didn't have a spring, you didn't have a full summer. I don't think you expect that with these two teams because they bring back so much experience. I mean, I think maybe all of Western Kentucky's defense is back, if not maybe just a few pieces. Louisville has a total of 18 starters back on offense and defense. Offensively, you expect them to come out and be strong right away. I think if they can get going offensively early, I think they could put Western away. I just don't know that Western has the playmakers on the outside to compete with Louisville's athletes. But if Western can get some pressure on Mikael Cunningham, like I said, they have two stellar defensive ends. I think they can make this a game for sure.
Absolutely. Now, looking forward to it. What is it? ACC Network primetime?
Yep, 8 p.m.
8 p.m. Guys, we got anything else?
Yeah, Cameron, taking a look at this Louisville ball club, just tell us about some of the guys to really keep an eye on, and maybe some of the also areas in this game tomorrow to keep an eye on in terms of matchups and areas that both clubs could exploit. Yeah.
I think number one first thing I watch is Louisville's tackles. I mean, you replace an NFL, a top 15 pick in Mekhi Becton, the left tackle, and you replace Tyler Haycraft, who's playing for the Giants right now at right tackle. And like I said, West Kentucky has two really good ends. I think one that will be playing in the NFL next year. So that's important. I think that's the most important matchup right there is how Louisville contains those ends with the new tackle positions. And I think on the defensive side, you look at their corners and their secondary are really, I wouldn't say a revamped secondary, but one with a lot more experience. They bring back three corners. They're starting safeties healthy now. And they got a Liberty transfer who I think has surprised a lot of people in Kytrell Clark. So they've wanted to cut down on the big plays they gave up last year, and that'll be another big thing to watch tomorrow as well.
I know last year, Kyle, remember how much we talked about the Western Kentucky defense? I know you were – it seemed like every time when the Pirates would be off and we'd have our general college football playback, you were always talking about the Hilltoppers D.
Yeah, their defense was fantastic last year. Really surprising. I watched them in game one, and they lost to Central Arkansas. And then to see how much better they got as the year went on, and that defense was just dominant at times. So if the Cardinals are obviously more talented than Western, but man, if Western can, defense is always a hit offense, and if Western can force a couple turnovers early, I think they could give the Cardinals a ball game.
Right, I agree, and that's one thing Louisville didn't do a lot of last year. They didn't turn the ball over much. I mean, their two top running backs didn't lose a fumble last season. Their quarterback only threw off the top of my head maybe 6 interceptions. He didn't throw very many. So that's one thing they did a good job of last year was keeping the ball. So, but I agree if they get pressure and can force some turnovers, I think it could be a real ball game on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Bubba, you know me, I'm terrible with names. Our former player that's a co-OC there at Louisville,
Dwayne Ledford.
Yeah, Dwayne Ledford.
What are your thoughts of Coach Ledford?
Yeah, I love Coach Ledford. He's a great guy. He's really kind of changed that offensive line. Really, the mentality, everything that they have there. They've playing a lot more physical. I mean, they are playing mean, and that's kind of how Ledford is. Not a mean guy, but he wants to play mean, if that makes sense. Ledford's a really good guy. He has completely revamped it up at the line, and they bought into everything he's asked of them.
So he's O coach and co-OC or run game coordinator. What is his official title?
He's the head OC.
Head OC. Okay.
Yeah, but Satterfield is calling plays.
Okay, gotcha. Right.
Yeah.
And when I think of Dwayne Ledford and some other members of that staff, I think of last year when they were playing in Winston-Salem when they beat Wake Forest in an absolute shootout. And I remember that pregame video that went viral on social media. And it was Coach Ledford and a few others that were just going absolutely crazy, and that was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, they do that a lot, and I think that's something else to watch as well because, I mean, as we mentioned, there's not going to be as many fans. So how does this team energize itself? They have a lot of coaches with a lot of what they call juice or energy. Coach Ledford's one of those guys. Mark Ivey, the defensive line coach, was in that video as well, like slapping and pushing around and headbutt defensive linemen. So, they love to get pumped up before the game. Yeah,
and for our local fans in Pirate Nation that are watching this, our national preview here, if you watch the game tomorrow night, Louisville, Western Kentucky, Dwayne Ledford, I'm sure most of you guys remember, played offensive line here at East Carolina, and he's a guy to watch. Pay attention to Louisville and that offense because once Coach Houston gets this thing turned around here, obvious. Just keep your eyes on Dwayne Ledford.
Yeah.
Something else I wanted to bring up, Cameron, before we wrap this up, and really appreciate you coming on and carving out some time for us tonight. But I know last night Miami took on UAB, and of course the Eric King. That's a big storyline there. 17-point win for the Canes. That is who the Cardinals have up next after tomorrow, correct? Yeah,
week 2.
So I know that's a matchup you really have to be looking forward to.
Yeah. Miami looked. I mean, they didn't look great at times against UAB. They looked good, but it wasn't as good as you thought they might be. I think De'Aaron King is as a player. He's very, very dynamic, very mobile quarterback. He wasn't throwing very well yesterday, but I still think that they're a team to watch. I think UAB is really good, though. I don't think people are going to give UAB enough credit. I think they'll be pretty good this year. But there are some things I think you saw in that game that I think Louisville may be able to exploit once they look back at the film.
Yeah, I thought Miami was a little too vanilla at times last night. I think they thought they were going to be able to out-talent UAB a little more than what they did, and UAB hung around, I think, a little more than Miami put it away comfortably late. But I think had they maybe been a little bit more exotic with their game plan, they could have put UAB away sooner.
Yeah, and I wonder if that is a thing of having a new quarterback who didn't get a lot of offseason time with the team. I think we're going to see that with a lot of people this year, and I wonder that with Western too because they have a new quarterback in Tyrell Rome from Maryland. So I think you may see a lot of vanilla offense from a lot of teams this year. I don't think you'll see that from Louisville because they bring so much back, but you may see that from a lot of teams these first couple of weeks.
Yep, I agree. Bob, you got anything else?
Well, Cameron, no, I'm good. Cameron, we really appreciate your time tonight, and we certainly look forward to having you back on as the season progresses.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, good luck to the Cardinals.
Up next, now joining us from the Kansas City Star is Jesse Newell. Jesse, we appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
One of the games taking place tomorrow is Kansas taking on the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. Last year, the Chanticleers went into Memorial Stadium and came out with a victory. And so I know the Jayhawks and Les Miles and company they've certainly had this one circled.
Yeah, not only that, 12-7, kind of ugly. It was not the best of starts early in the season to have that week 2 loss, and kind of a viral video as well. Coastal Carolina hung up a Jayhawk piñata in the locker room, and they were pretty happy to win, and then came in and knocked that thing down, knocked the stuffing out of it. So I didn't get any word whether the candy flew out or not, but KU is going to be ready to play this one. It's they were supposed to play this game at Coastal Carolina, and then all the non-conference schedules kind of got jumbled and mixed up. So they got this game at home again this year, and then they'll play at Coastal Carolina. At least the plan is to play them next year since it was a 2-for-1 series. But, Puka Williams, KU star running back, he's pretty mild-mannered when it comes to quotes, doesn't really say much. But when he was asked about Coastal Carolina, he said something to the effect of, there's a reason that game got rescheduled for this year and that they're playing them again this year when they had other options. So, yeah, I think Kansas is ready for this game, and they're obviously ready to show that they can score more than 7 points at home against the Chanticleers.
I remember watching highlights for that game and watching your running backs and telling Bubba, I said, I have no idea how in the hell Kansas only scored 7 points in that game. And then you guys had your breakout game against Boston College and ran the ball all down their throats. And I said, see, told you. But you guys got better, or I should say you guys. Kansas got better as the season went on. And so, as you guys were saying, I was surprised to see this line only be 7. Nothing against the Chanticleers. They do a good job down there in Conway. But I fully expect Kansas to blow this game out.
Well, and it's so weird to look at the lines right now because you just wonder with COVID, who's going to be in the game and who's not. I know Coastal Carolina has battled some of that through practices. Even hearing their coach talk earlier this week, it seems like they've got a few guys maybe in the rotation that are going to be out, but potentially could have some depth issues on the offense just based off of that. So sometimes the lines look a little bit off to me, but it makes me wonder if the numbers or the number of people available could play into that. And the other part of this, if we're being completely honest about KU, the defense, there's a lot to wonder about with this defense. They lost almost their entire defensive line from a year ago, lost almost the entire secondary from a year ago. And the linebackers they bring back, Drew Prox was a great player for 4 games last year, but separated his shoulder. He was out for most of the season, took a red shirt. And then they had a couple guys step in that were young players, but really just kind of thrown in the deep end of the pool. And sometimes they were running left when they should have been running right. So there's a lot of questions for KU when it comes to the defensive end. So if I'm looking at this game, I'm thinking 12-7 is probably not very likely. I think KU's offense is going to be better. And obviously Coastal should have some success against KU's defense, which might be finding itself out there.
Before we break down the game a little more, do you think you mentioned how you guys have a pending trip to down to Coastal, down to Conway, South Carolina for the Jayhawks to play at Coastal. Does Les, and obviously that game was scheduled before Les got there, I'm sure, the series. But does Les want to play more Southern teams to kind of get a foothold on recruiting in the Southeast? Obviously, been at LSU for so many years. Do you know if that's something he wants to do or what?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it just sort of depends on the coach. I like Charlie Weiss for a while had a series in Hawaii that he wanted to play, and he was recruiting that area for a while, then that thing got called off. So it would make some sense. It's sort of interesting with KU's recruiting though, because they've had success recently in places that they haven't in a long time. You think back to like the Mark Mangino days, and it was usually Texas. They were grabbing those kids like Aqib Talib, that was a 2-star, maybe a little bit overlooked, and all of a sudden, he's part of an Orange Bowl team. Todd Reesing, those sorts of guys maybe a little bit overlooked, and then kind of wanted to play the big name schools and wanted to show Texas and some of those other Big 12 schools that they could play. But KU has had recruiting success even before Les Miles in Louisiana. Former running back coach Tony Hull was a big part of that. And we talk about Puka Williams, the running back. He's from Louisiana, one of the biggest recruits they've ever gotten. And then recently, it's sort of been interesting that the offensive coordinator, Brent Dearman, he's had a lot of success in Arkansas, which is kind of his stomping grounds and some of the places in the South. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's how KU shifts its schedule. But we know how this works as well with COVID and then with football schedules in general, where you're trying to kind of book these things a few years out in advance. So it wouldn't surprise me, but there haven't been many plans to do that as of yet. And like I said, we'll see how all this new things happening with having to reshuffle schedules and do things with this year impacts that over time. But it wouldn't surprise me at all because KU has had some recruiting success recently down south in some of LSU, Les Miles' old stomping grounds.
Right. And I guess the speaking of Les, is the excitement still there? Obviously, when you guys when Kansas hired Les, there was a lot of buzz about that. A lot of people excited. A lot of people were surprised to see him go to Kansas. Is the buzz still there with the fan base? Do you sense people are still as excited about Les Miles as they were? I would imagine so. I would assume year one, despite the record, would be considered a success.
Well, actually, yeah, year one because of the record would be considered a success because
they didn't go to a bowl, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's the point I'm making is that they won 3 games, but 3 games is the high water mark for the last decade for Kansas. So, they tied the highest win total that Kansas has had in 10 years. So, actually, the 3 wins was good. I mean, that was more than expected, and that was pretty good for Les just because coming in, you wonder and you're not sure, and he kind of had that honeymoon period. He got hired before the previous season ended. He was there, and David Beatty finished off that season. So he had a really long honeymoon period. So for KU to come in and then certain games, Brent Dearman got promoted offensive coordinator and they were running up the score offensively, doing some things they haven't done, point-wise in a decade. So there were a lot of positive signs there. The only tricky part about this season is just that, as I mentioned with the defense, there's a lot of guys that they lost off last year's roster. There's going to be some inexperience. And I think one of the best moves he made coming in is KU was always, in the last few years, they've worked at a roster scholarship discrepancy because they've taken a lot of JUCO players, and Charlie Weiss back and they kicked a bunch of guys off the team, and they've just been kind of chasing the 85, scholarship total number for a long time. So Les Miles came in and he took 25 freshmen, took all freshmen with his recruiting class, which is going to be great for the long-term health of the program. But also, hey, if you need an offensive tackle or you need a quarterback or you've got questions at defensive line or your entire secondary is leaving, that's usually when you go out and grab a JUCO guy. That's when you go and panic a little bit and say, hey, I need an immediate start. I'm going to grab that guy. So that's where this year could be a little bit more difficult for Kansas, just because Les Miles did the right thing for the future of the program, but that might cause some short-term pain. So I think still expectations high for Les Miles, and some of the fans who might not know all that quite as much might, want just as many wins, even with a shorter schedule, even with fewer non-conference games. But I think realistically, if KU got to 2 wins this year, that'd probably be a pretty good feat considering all the things that are kind of going against them, knowing they only won non-con opponent. And again, knowing that in the Big 12 schedule, they're probably going to be double-digit favorites in pretty much every game that they play.
Yeah, no doubt. And
Kyle, can you guys hear me okay?
We got you, Bubba.
Okay, if you can hear me fine. No, one of the things I wanted to bring up, Jesse, I know I told Kyle last year that I don't remember if it was over Christmas break or what, but I was just looking around seeing different shows on ESPN Plus, and I started binge watching Miles to Go, and that was tremendous. It was a lot of fun, and I think I watched every single episode in a span of probably like 48 hours.
That thing took on a life of its own for sure, and even it obviously helped them some in recruiting, helped them with publicity, but also there was sort of a famous comment he made the week before the K-State game where he basically said, who is K-State? Who is K-State? Got his players all fired up, but unknowingly got all of K-State's players fired up as they watched the video of that, and KU got drubbed the next week at home by K-State, even though we talk about the Les Miles excitement. That was a sellout crowd at Booth Memorial Stadium, something that hadn't happened in a long time. A lot of those people were K-State fans. I know that. But still, even when there were K-State fans before, there weren't enough KU fans to fill in to make that a full stadium. So, yeah, that was entertaining if people want to go back and watch that. Pretty well done. I know that the only kind of, I don't know if we want to say controversy with it, but KU Athletics sort of had veto power on the editing. So this is not a true documentary where everything goes. I think there were some moments where they said, let's take that out, let's get that out of there, make sure that this thing is a little bit more, politically correct or whatever you want to say there. But still some revealing stuff with there. And it even started from the beginning when Les Miles was hired. So obviously a lot of episodes there you can go check out. But yeah, I think that served its purpose, which was, hey, trying to get people more familiar with how Les Miles coaches, what the KU football program is, the challenges that are there, and the type of people they're trying to bring in. And for year one, I think that's part of what they were trying to do, is just kind of get in people's minds what this whole thing is going to be about.
And what will the attendance be tomorrow at Kansas? What's the allotment? Is it 20% or what?
0. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So for a while they thought that they were going to get 20 to 25% in. If you guys watched football last night, the Kansas City Chiefs just had 22% attendance, and that's just about 40 miles down the road. But KU Chancellor Douglas Girard is a surgeon. So KU's basic president is from the medical field, and they've had kind of a committee help them make these decisions. And they announced about a week ago that they would sit this first one out and then reevaluate for future games, future home games starting in October. So there'll be no fans there, but that's part of the reason for this crazy time at 9 p.m. Once they couldn't get fans in there, I don't think they really minded as much to play this game at 9 p.m. Central, which also is 10 p.m. Eastern. So for Coastal Carolina, I mean, those guys, hopefully they flip their sleep schedule, because they're going to be playing a football game when their body clocks are saying it's 1 a.m. But that's games on Fox Sports 1, so I know they got a little bit of national TV publicity out of that as well, and KU will take that when they can get it.
Your boy, you're playing right in them boys' hands. They hang out in Myrtle Beach all the time. 1 a.m. just when they're getting started.
Well, I mean, I guess you talk to KU too. Maybe they get started about 11 to 11:30 midnight too. So yeah, I guess we'll see which team has the advantage in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm assuming you're a beat writer for Kansas. Do you cover Kansas State at all?
I don't. Kellis Robinette, actually, our company owns the Wichita Eagle too, so he covers it for K-State. So he's on down the road and gets to cover them. And obviously for both of us, it's usually a little bit flipped. Usually the football season is the big thing for K-State, and basketball depends on the year. And obviously for Kansas, there'll be a lot of eyes on KU football, but there'll be a lot more eyes on KU basketball when that thing rolls around.
Yeah, that's my upset of the week tomorrow. I like Arkansas State with a game under their belt to upset Kansas State. So that's what I was asking.
Yeah, they you want to talk about teams that have battled some COVID. K-State is one of those. And so that's maybe one of those lines you want to watch to see if some crazy things happen here late, because K-State had to shut down workouts and then things got better. And then there's kind of been whispers lately that, there's some position groups that are sort of hurting a little bit. So, yeah, again, that's what's going to be so weird about this week one is you might tune into a game and all of a sudden you're seeing a safety play wide receiver or something crazy like that. But that's maybe what some of these teams are going to have to do to make sure that these games get in.
Absolutely.
Jesse, as we're diving into this matchup, and forgive me if you've already mentioned this because I had to step away for a moment. One of our viewers chimes in, Justin Butts. He said he's talking about the Memphis team. Memphis, 20 players testing positive after their game with Arkansas State. So as far as Kansas, how have things gone there with the testing and contact tracing, et cetera?
Yeah, so we can go back to the early history. KU shut down summer workouts for a while because of COVID cases. They got back about 3 weeks later. Les Miles announced for 2 weeks in a row about a month ago that they had nobody in quarantine, and then went silent on it 2 weeks ago. We asked him this week. He didn't say anything official, and then the state of Kansas put out a list of where there were outbreaks, and they listed the Kansas football team. So that kind of got people's attention very quickly. Right after that, KU sort of clarified, and they said that as of it was Wednesday that the football team had 3 positive cases, and that what the health site was basically listing as 14. Those had happened over the past 28 days. So they were saying 3 current positives on KU's roster. And again, we don't know who those are. We don't know exactly how that's going to affect Kansas. But, you pick the right person, especially, as I mentioned, on defense, where they're already sort of thin. It potentially could impact them. But that's what we know about them as of right now. And like I said, we'll wait until Saturday to see how all this plays out. But 3 positive cases as of a couple days ago. So this game should be just fine.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's a 10 Eastern kick on FX or Fox Sports 1 rather. And which is interesting, but I guess there's going to be a lot of that because no West Coast teams, no Pac-12 football. The only thing out west is BYU. So I guess some of you Central Time guys are going to get stuck with those late games.
Well, yeah, and it's sort of weird too. Tim Brando and Spencer Tillman will be on the call. So obviously 2 of the well-known names in college football. And sort of interestingly, if you remember a couple years back after Les Miles had been fired from LSU, he joined the Fox booth for a while, and he did so with Tim Brando and Spencer Tillman. So he gets to see a couple of his buddies as part of this game.
Tim Brando, a friend of the show and one of my favorite people in broadcasting history. Bubba, we got anything else?
Yeah, as last season went along, you've mentioned offensive coordinator Brent Dearman multiple times, and that was one of those. I really enjoyed his personality on Miles to Go and that progress that the Jayhawks offense made last season. I know they lit it up down at Texas, a heartbreaker that they weren't unable to pull out, but I'm definitely intrigued by him, and this Jayhawk offense is going to be interesting to keep an eye on with Puka Williams and company as the season progresses.
Yeah, he's the great hope for Kansas, really. He's kind of the hot shot offensive coordinator, joined halfway through the season, was promoted to that position. You mentioned his first game after a bye week was against Texas, and they nearly hung 50 at Austin on the Longhorns, who were 15th ranked at the time. And that was really, that was the whoa, who is this guy and where is KU's offense going to go from here? It's sort of interesting. So his last 6 games, 3 of them were really good against Big 12 opponents, and 3 of them were really lousy. But still, overall, if you take just the average point total, it's way above what Kansas has basically ever done in Big 12 play, at least since the Mangino era. So, yes, listen, he's got some parts to deal with. He's got some parts he can, some really talented pieces. I talked about Puka Williams, who could challenge for All-American honors. They've got 2 of the top 10 returning receivers in Stephon Robinson and Andrew Parchment. So look for those talent guys. They have guys at the talent positions. question marks at the offensive tackle, and we don't know their quarterback yet. It'll either be Thomas McVitie or Miles Kendrick. Those guys might rotate. We'll see what happens. But, yeah, the big hope for Kansas is that Brent Dearman, this young, energetic offensive coordinator who led their offense last year to some really big gains, if he can come out and do that same sort of thing over a full season with his whole system set in there, then maybe KU can have kind of a jump offensively that we might have foreseen a little bit starting with the last half of last year.
Go ahead, Bo.
Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
I was just going to say, in the COVID era, if you do not have an established quarterback and you're planning on playing two, I'd keep playing two because you're probably going to need them both when the season's over.
Yeah, it's an interesting battle, and KU was really in on Felipe Franks. I just talked about them taking 25 freshmen. They were in on the Florida transfer, and I think for a while really thought they had him. So that position, they were definitely looking for potential upgrade there. But Thomas McVitie is kind of interesting. He went to Pittsburgh to start off with and was a quarterback there, then kind of got moved to special teams and wide receiver. So he transferred to JUCO and then got to Kansas. Was supposed to be Les Miles' guy last year, but got beat out by Carter Stanley, who had a great year. And then Miles Kendrick is shorter, 5'10". He's also from the JUCO ranks. Didn't play at all last year. Played 4 games the year before. But it's probably one of the things they for the last 5 years, KU has not announced its starting quarterback before the game. And it's just crazy to think that they couldn't have even accidentally stumbled into a guy who would come back the next season and be an incumbent. But that's just the way KU football has worked lately. And they're going to keep every advantage they could against Coastal Carolina. But I'd probably give the lean to Thomas McVitie here, and we'll see if they rotate guys. Sometimes you hear that from coaches, and it doesn't always happen. Last year, they mostly stuck with Carter Stanley. So I'd expect Thomas McVitie to get the first snap tomorrow, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Jesse, we certainly appreciate your time giving us an inside look at the Jayhawks and Chanticleers, and we'd love to have you back on the program as the season progresses.
All right. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, thanks.
Dave, you with us?
The shadow figure that is Dave.
Senor Richmond, are you with us?
He's with us.
I'm here.
Gotcha.
Yes.
He has lag. He's with us.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right.
Now,
I'm here.
welcoming in, we got you, Dave. Now welcoming in from the Tulane Green Wave. When I think of the Green Wave, it's no disrespect to our next guest, but you think of Todd Graffinini, longtime play-by-play voice. Welcome in now, I guess in his second season, Andrew Allegretta. Andrew, appreciate you joining us tonight.
Good to be with you guys. Graf is flying those private planes with the NBA now, so he's doing okay.
Yeah, do you get sick of people comparing you to Graf? It has to drive you crazy.
You know what? To be honest, I'm not sure it happens too much, or if it does, I haven't heard it a ton. So it's okay by me. We've got very different styles, and that's totally fine. Bubba, by the way, I did need to make a note that Mac McCarthy has put your book in the mail. You will be getting it soon.
I was not expecting to hear that from you, but that's great news. But that's hilarious because Coach Mack actually reached out to me yesterday asking me for my address.
Mac McCarthy and I go back to Virginia Tech. I worked at Virginia Tech for 8 years before coming to Tulane, and we would do some ESPN3 ACC Network Extra broadcast. I'd do play-by-play. He would do color commentary since he's a Virginia Tech grad. So the book is on the way.
That's awesome. Small world.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
That sounds cool. Talk about this is Dave Richmond, and talk about with Tulane. I'm really happy with Coach Fritz, and the program has really, really grown under his leadership.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I think you have to start with the simple fact that Tulane has gone to back-to-back bowl games and won back-to-back bowl games for the first time in program history. That's not a small feat. I do understand Tulane does have some history. 1998 with the perfect season and Sean King. You can go back to the Mac Brown days in the 80s. And of course, they were great in the 30s. But in terms of current college football, it's been tough. So the fact that they have gone to back-to-back bowl games, back-to-back winning seasons, and won back-to-back bowl games, it's not small. And Coach Fritz has done a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. The Green Wave, travel to South Alabama this week down in Mobile. The Jaguars coming off the big upset of Southern Miss, went ahead and took out a head coach in week 1. What can you tell us about the matchup, and what are your thoughts on the opponent first with the Jags?
Well, I think the Jaguars probably surprised some people beating Southern Miss the way that they did, and it obviously caused Southern Miss to fire its head coach or caused Jayhawks to resign, depending on how you want to look at it. So there was some surprise that the Jaguars showed up the way that they did. I think the way that they won that game was interesting. They won a lot of 50-50 jump balls down the field between Trotter and Tolbert, their wide receiver. So I think you start there with the matchup, just the fact that Tulane is going to have, I would think, better defensive backs than Southern Miss has, just by proxy of athleticism. And Jalen Monroe is our starting cornerback, and he does have some NFL potential. So I would think the way that South Alabama beat Southern Miss doesn't add up to beating Tulane in the same way. So I'll keep my eye on that.
Yeah, no doubt. And Coach Fritz last year, a bit of a change, and shouldn't say change in philosophy on offense. They still ran the ball, but a little bit of change in the way they were doing it. Is that what they're going to look like again this year?
Yeah, for sure. Will Hall's the offensive coordinator. He is going to be a hot name when it comes to head coaching jobs down the road, but he's in his second season. Yeah, he might be. We'll see. He's a Mississippi kid from Amory. His father is the all-time winningest high school coach in the state of Mississippi, so he's a well-respected football name in the college football business. But he's if there's a gym rat of coaches, that's Will Hall. He does nothing but study game film, and he's incredibly creative. Tulane finished second in the AAC last year in rushing, and I think that should continue. I recognize you can read some game previews, and it's going to say Tulane is missing its top running backs from last season with Corey Dauphine, who was granted a 6th year but then tore his ACL, and Darius Bradwell, who graduated. I'm not sure that it matters, guys, because there's a redshirt freshman by the name of Tajay Spears from just across Lake Ponchatoula, Louisiana. I think he's going to take this conference by storm this season. He's a guy that, this is lofty praise, but quietly they will compare him to Kenny Gainwell at Memphis. And I recognize that Gainwell's not playing this season, but you're talking about a supreme athlete, and that's what Tajay Spears is. So just because Darius Bradwell and Corey Dauphine are gone, I don't think it matters. They're going to run the football exceptionally well.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, this game with USA was added, correct? This was not on your schedule originally?
Correct. I think this was supposed to be the Northwestern game for us. So we added South Alabama and Southern Miss to replace Northwestern and Mississippi State.
Okay, so you added 2 road opponents to replace 2 road opponents.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. I was wondering how this game came to be, and I didn't remember you guys playing them in New Orleans, so I was surprised to see the first meeting in Mobile. Yeah, and so I was like, hey, so it must be added.
Yeah, so we've got future games against both South Alabama as well as Southern Miss, so I think it made a lot of sense to tack them on when these games became available. And from a financial standpoint, it makes a lot of sense because money matters in a COVID world right now. Mm-hmm. So this made a lot of logical sense for the athletic directors to get together and make this happen.
Yeah. Bobby,
yeah, one of the real matchups to watch in this one is that South Alabama passing attack against the Tulane secondary based on a lot of what I'm seeing. So what are your take on that?
Yeah, I just think Tulane should have a better time of it than Southern Miss did. I mentioned Jalen Monroe. He's the starting cornerback. He's the main guy for Tulane. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's matched up with Tolbert, who's the guy that had 170 yards against Southern Miss and 2 touchdowns. He's undersized, but our coaches feel like he's got NFL potential. And then in addition, Tulane has a transfer from Florida State by the name of Kyle Myers. He's a New Orleans kid, so he's coming back home. This is his final season. His athleticism fits in with this conference really well. And then we've got another player by the name of Willie Langham. He's the one tall, physical cornerback that Tulane's got. I think those 3 guys will be okay. And then the one thing I didn't mention is the strength of this team for Tulane is the pass rush. Patrick Johnson is the joker position, that stand-up defensive end position. A couple of seasons ago, he had 10.5 sacks. He struggled last year because of an injury, but he's a 2-time All-AAC second team member. If he can get pressure on Trotter plus the entire defensive line, I just don't see South Alabama being as effective with those deep balls, those jump balls like they were against Southern Miss.
No, I tend to agree.
I was going to ask you about as far as East Carolina and Tulane have a long tradition of playing each other. Now it's really nice for Tulane to have a stadium that's on campus. Can you talk about it? I got to imagine that's got to help recruiting.
Yeah, so this goes back, I guess, to 2014 was the first season of Yulman Stadium. They moved from the Superdome, which it's tough, guys. I mean, New Orleans is obviously a pro sports market. Greenville is an East Carolina market. So you guys get the benefit of filling up that place. And I have come there a couple of times with Virginia Tech, and you guys get it rocking. And it's hard to stuff, even if you get 10, 15, 20,000 people in the Superdome, it's still going to feel pretty empty. So the fact that we can get a 30,000 seat stadium, and even if you put 20,000 people in it, it feels like a pretty good environment. There's some things that Tulane will need to upgrade over the long term, just based on where the entire conference is going. Things like, what Cincinnati is doing, what you guys have done, I know, at East Carolina. So they've got some work to do, but it's good to have a home at Yulman Stadium. And I think that's benefited them, and having the new coaching staff use it effectively is equally beneficial.
And what are the expectations? Obviously, the expectation for the Green Wave this week is to beat South Alabama.
Yes.
But what do you feel the expectations are for this season? I mean, what would be a successful season?
I think the first thing you start with is the fact that you don't know how many games you're going to get in. So that becomes incredibly uncomfortable. It's easy to sit here and say, I think this team should, they've won 7 games each of the past 2 years. They should strive for an 8-win season, maybe get 9 in a bowl game, but you just don't know. I saw you guys talking about the Memphis thing. Tulane plays Memphis at the end of this season, so hopefully that's fine by them, but you don't know. So what is a winning season this year? It's hard to measure it in the 7, 8, 9 win category like you typically talk about. But I think it's a program that should consider itself competitive, if not favorites, in a lot more games than they typically have been able to do so. It's going to be a challenge against Memphis. It'll be a challenge against UCF. With all due respect, I think Tulane comes into games like East Carolina thinking that they should win those games instead of being a team that doesn't know, or it plays Temple and it feels like it should win that game now, or it plays Navy next week at Yulman Stadium. And after what we saw against BYU, it feels like it should beat Navy. It's just a different feeling for this program. So a winning season and a bowl win, I think, is where you start with the expectations. I know you guys know this, but certainly with the conference moving to just one standing versus 2 divisions, that makes getting to the championship game harder for a team like Tulane. But that would be where they strive for. Can they find themselves in that top 1, 2, 3 position of this conference? Bare minimum, can they get themselves to the top of the middle of the pack, right? With SMU and Temple and teams like that, so to speak.
And you mentioned 2 big picture things that I've been wondering about. One, conference championship. At some point, the Americans got to announce they're pushing this thing back to the 19th of December. There's going to be too many games that are going to have to be made up. For instance, Memphis and Houston. And the second, you mentioned bowl games. I believe there's 42 bowl games. So by my count, 42 bowl games equals 84 teams. If by my count, there are 76 teams playing FBS football this year. So does every team get a bowl game?
I don't know. I'll take your math on that. That was pretty good. I'm just trying to figure out who's going to run the ball mostly tomorrow for Tulane. But I don't know. That's why when you ask about expectations, it's hard to figure things out, right? Because you say, they should go to a bowl game, which means someone has finished at or above 500 in a typical season. But I don't know that that's the case in 2020, because someone could go 5-7 and they've got to fill a bowl spot. So I'm not sure necessarily. And as far as the conference championship game goes, I think the benefit for the American is the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, right, I know this is my second season in the league, but they play that at the top team's home venue. Yes. So that in theory should not create as much scheduling conflict as, say, the ACC, which plays it in Charlotte, and all of a sudden you've got some weird conflict with the Panthers or something like that. So I guess that would help.
Yeah, I agree with that totally, but there's no way that thing's getting played the first weekend in December. There's going to be too many games that are going to have to be made up. And
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen next week. I only know that we made it through testing this week, and the game against South Al is on. Talk to me next week to see if we play the game against Navy.
Well, let's hope you do. Guys, you got anything else?
Yeah, Andrew, excellent point that you make as far as just the way Coach Fritz has raised the expectations there, doing unprecedented things in New Orleans. Before we let you go, tell folks how they can tune in. Obviously, I think you guys are on TuneIn Radio to listen to the broadcast if they can't watch the game tomorrow night. So tell people those things, how they can follow you on social media, et cetera.
Yeah, sure. First off, give me 2 seconds, and I'm going to shill for Coach Fritz because I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in all of college football. He has done such a good job, whether it's Georgia Southern, Sam Houston State. He has won everywhere he's gone. He has never coached at a Power 5 school, which is why I think he goes somewhat under the radar. But he has been this quiet, consistent program builder. And I know you guys know this being in this conference, but going 7-6 back-to-back seasons at Tulane is like going 10-2 at other places. So he's a great, great coach. As far as where you can listen, correct. We're on TuneIn for the folks that are out there in East North Carolina, chewing down on some good barbecue tomorrow. You can pull it up on TuneIn if you desire to do so. Just search the Tulane Sports Network and pull us up. My social media account is just at Allegretta, Allegretta. You can track me down on the Tulane's website as well. So good to talk to you guys. Looking forward to some football.
And is that game Tulane, South Alabama, is that primetime ESPN2?
It is 7:30 Eastern time tomorrow.
All right.
Andrew, really appreciate you joining us tonight. It's been great chatting for the first time on the program. I really look forward to having you back on as the season moves on, and have an excellent call tomorrow, and best of luck to the Green Wave this season.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, Kyle, we're going from a game that means a lot to us, and just from being in the American Athletic Conference standpoint to talking about a game that's close to home. Tomorrow, several North Carolina teams in action, and one of those teams is Wake Forest. They're hosting #1 Clemson. Not an easy task for the Demon Deacons in the opener, but welcome in right now from the Tiger Insider, Will Vandervort. Will, we appreciate you joining us.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah, we got you. Doing great.
All right, cool. Thanks for having me.
One of the things about this game tomorrow is certainly not going to look anything like what it typically does, but College Game Day is going to be in Winston-Salem.
Yeah, I don't know what that's going to look like tomorrow, to be honest with you. It's no fans there, no fans in the game, obviously, but no fans there either. And I don't know how they're going to do the show. I'm interested to see what it's going to be like. I know they're doing the, people can go on their Zoom and all that stuff and do things, but the fan experience that way. But that's a little, I don't know. I'll be honest with you guys. I think that's kind of cheesy myself, but that's just who I am. But I'm old school, I guess, and I just think it's kind of weird. But it's gonna be weird watching game day, and I don't know if they're gonna be at Winston-Salem or they're gonna be doing it from Bristol. I don't know what the case is. I know Kirk Herbstreit and those guys aren't doing the game tomorrow night. That's because they're doing the Monday night game. So it's interesting to see where those guys are actually going to be located when they start the show tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't get that. They said it's going to be live from Winston-Salem, but it seems kind of pointless to take a crew from Bristol, Connecticut to Winston-Salem when you can have no fans. So I don't understand that either. But they do say game day is going to be at that game. So are they just encouraging, like you said, Wake Forest and Clemson fans to zoom in? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And that, I guess we'll find out tomorrow. It'll be, I know one thing, Coach Corso won't be there because, for obvious reasons, they don't want to put him in a situation. He'll be probably back at his Florida home like he was last week in that little studio they've made up for him. So we do know that part. As far as if the other three guys will be there, I don't know.
Hey, Will, before we dive into this matchup between the Tigers and Demon Deacons, let's talk a couple other things pertaining to the Clemson program. Obviously, the elephant in the room, COVID. I know back, I guess, probably 2 months or so ago now, pushing 2 months, Clemson was reporting numbers like 35 and 40 positive tests. So bring us up to speed on where the Tigers stand right now.
Yeah, Clemson, going into this week in pretty good shape. They did do their test today. The ACC, as you know, requires 3 tests a week. And they did release numbers, not with the football necessarily, but 9 other sports. And Clemson, I think, reported 29 players with 29 student athletes, I should say. 29 people, 24 student athletes tested positive for COVID this past week. Those do not include today's test that the football team did today before they left to go to Winston-Salem. So, now I can tell you this. I saw Trevor Lawrence. Clemson does a great job with their social media team. And you saw Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and all the big stars getting on the bus. So that means they passed. If there is somebody right now, we're not going to find out till 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon when they release the travel roster to us. So, but as far as early in the year, there was some issues with it back in June when they got on campus and everything. But, they I think what happened with Clemson is the players kind of woke up and saw how they have to really be smart and stay within their bubble. And what you saw was the guys just they ended up not going out, and they stayed smart with this whole thing. They stayed away from the regular students. And even in the summertime, Clemson has a lot of students on, around the school and stuff like that. So, it was very easy for them to go to a party or something like that initially. But now, they've kind of got smart. And so starting in July, like early July, from July to last week, Clemson had a total of 4 players in that 2-month span that tested positive for COVID, and 2 came actually the week before. So they actually went almost 2 months with only 2 guys getting positive after they started off initially on the back end of that, not as well. So they're in pretty good shape, I think, overall, because as Dabo says, they kind of wised up and got smart, and they realized they want to play football this year. So they stopped doing whatever it was they were doing.
Yeah, speaking of Trevor Lawrence, obviously beloved quarterback at Clemson, but even some people that might not have been a big fan of him on the football field suddenly became kind of a national folk hero to those of us who wanted college football with the hashtag Let Us Play there on Twitter, Facebook, and social media in general that Trevor kind of got started. And talk about that, the national attention he got from a standpoint of being very vocal about we want to play.
Yeah, it got to a point there where, there was the rumor, the Big Ten, this is after I guess it was the Mid-America Conference or whatever, decided they weren't going to play, and a couple other conferences. And then the Big Ten, the word comes out the Big Ten's not going to play. And I think what that did was it kind of caused a lot of the players from the Power 5 conferences to panic a little bit. Like, now they're seeing there's a real possibility they couldn't play. And I think Trevor kind of was like, in that boat, like, hey, look, one of us has got to say something. We just can't continue to be quiet. And so Trevor went out there on his own and tweeted that. And when it did, it kind of sparked, this group of players that all kind of jumped on it. I saw Justin Fields retweeted him, several other players, Sam Ehlinger, all those guys from Texas. So it was a bunch of players all over the country that started retweeting him and tweet quoting him as well. And so it kind of took off. That led to the players union thing we saw come out like a couple days later after that. Where the players were saying they wanted to play. And then, of course, we do get the news on that Tuesday that the Big Ten has decided they're going to postpone their season, and then the Pac-12 follows suit. But the ACC and the SEC, and they kind of stayed strong. And I think, I won't say totally that was the reason why, but I will say it played a role in why the ACC and the SEC continued to move forward, because I think they did listen to the players a little bit. And put their, kind of said, we got to pay attention to what these guys, they're the guys that are out there doing it. And if they're saying they want to play, we need to listen to them, and we need to listen and try to figure out a way where we can make this work. And I think you got to give Trevor credit for that, because nobody else was doing it. And, he stepped up to the plate and said, listen, we need to play football this year. We want to play. You guys need to listen to us. You're all worried about everything, but nobody's asked the players, hey, what do you think? Do you guys want to play? And obviously Trevor decided to go ahead and just tell everybody that and kind of get the attention that way toward the players.
Yeah, and if nothing else, I was going to follow up on that, Bubba. If nothing else, it helped with perception, with a lot of a lot of criticism on conferences about, should these young men play? Should they be made to play, kind of thing? And so when you got a large group saying, "Hey, we want to play," and that definitely, at least it helps with the perception to make it okay for the ACC, SEC, Big 12, American Conference USA, and Sun Belt to say we're going to play.
Yeah, it does, and I think it's really just, to me, when I remember when it happened, it came out that night, and I was I think it was like a night like this, a Friday night or Saturday night, and I got word that, hey, did you see what Trevor tweeted? And I was like, what? And so of course I went up there, and you write a story on it and get it out there. But it really was at that point, like, you wondered, I think we all wondered if they were going to play college football at that point. This was what, mid-July, I would say mid to late July. And so you're sitting there 5 weeks away from the season starting, and you're wondering, are they going to play? And this is like maybe about a week before Clemson would start fall camp, I believe. And after that, I think things changed. I mean, it really did, to where all the talk of, are they going to play, and all this switched over to, they're going to play, and this is how they're going to play. This is what they're going to do. It all took a total different turn after Trevor Lawrence put that tweet out. It really did. And I'm not saying he's the sole reason. Again, I think he did play a big part in it, though. And and he'll say he didn't, and he'll say he had no part of that. But I kind of disagree with that. I think he's going to deserve the credit if they can get through this season and get to the college football playoff and have a championship. I think Trevor Lawrence deserves a lot of credit for being the guy to step up and say, hey, look, as players, we want to play. You guys need to figure it out how we can.
Yep. And the expectations, obviously, for Clemson is that college football playoff and competing for another national championship, just like you said. But got to get it started if you're going to get it done. And it starts this weekend in Winston-Salem against the Demon Deacons. So I looked earlier. I think you guys were like a 31-point favorite. I don't keep up with the lines that closely.
34 now.
34. Okay. So it's a very big spread. I just kind of wonder with game one, can anybody? I don't know. I guess definitely, if anybody can win by 34 in game one, it's going to be the Clemson Tigers. But what do you think that atmosphere is going to be like for a team like Clemson that's used to playing in front of big crowds in Death Valley? And when they're in away games, everybody sells out when the Clemson Tigers come to town because they want a shot at beating the best. Mm-hmm. So what's it going to be like for Clemson playing in a completely empty stadium in prime time in Winston-Salem?
I think it's going to be now they say they're going to bring their own energy and they're going to be fine and it's going to be no different than when they're in a scrimmage. That's all good, doll. But when they see the cameras there and they see the sideline reporter and they see the ESPN trucks, they're going to know, okay, this is actually a real game, yet there's nobody in the stands. I think they're going to struggle initially with it just because it is weird. It is different. I mean, even when they're in high school, these guys have never played in front of nobody. You know what I'm saying? I mean, even in high school, they've played in front of somebody. And so this is the first time in their playing careers that they're not going to have anybody in the stadium. The state of North Carolina is not allowing any parents in. So they're not even going to have parents.
Oh, boy, do we know.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's crazy that these guys are going to be just in this empty stadium, Wake Forest on one side, Clemson on the other side. I think ESPN is going to allow their sideline reporters somewhere in the stands. I'm not exactly sure where she'll be. And then that'll be it, And so, and then of course the media up in the press box, that's about all it's going to be in the stadium. So it's going to be weird. It will affect, I think, a little bit. But then I think once they start playing, I think talent will take over eventually, and Clemson will be Clemson. But to me, guys, it's going to be weird because you're just looking at them in an empty stadium playing a football game. We're used to seeing that in a scrimmage, not so much during the game that's supposed to count and is on television and stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. It's going to be strange, and it's something that you saw Monday night in up in Annapolis, and BYU walk the dog on Navy, and something you're going to see here locally with East Carolina in that same boat against UCF on the 26th with no fans allowed in the stands. Bubba, you got anything? I think I may be flying solo right now.
No, I'm here.
Mr. Rosenbaum.
No, just taking a look at this matchup. Obviously, Wake Forest had the quarterback move on with Jamie Newman to Georgia, who recently chose to opt out. But just taking a look at this Wake Forest program and the way they've fared so well under Dave Clawson, what, if any, areas of concern do you have with the Demon Deacons?
As far as concerns for Clemson to be aware of, that's what you're talking about?
Right. Yeah. A player or two for the Deeks to watch out for, or maybe position group and something like that.
Yeah, I would think probably the number one thing to watch out for, I think it's going to be an interesting matchup, will be Carlos Basham Jr. Against Clemson's Jackson Carman. Both guys are going to be probably first-round draft picks. It's going to be a great matchup to watch. So we'll see. And I think Wake Forest will probably use him in some different ways where he's not always on Carman. But I think that's the matchup to watch for me. And it's the one, to be honest with you guys, it's the one matchup that's kind of evenly matched, if you will. Because I don't know how many, Clemson's got a ton of 4- and 5-star guys out there. Wake Forest doesn't have many. So, I don't know how they're going to match up with Clemson in other areas, but this is a good matchup. And I think it's going to tell a lot about both those guys, where they're going to be able to, when they kind of start getting evaluated by pro scouts and stuff like that. I think probably the next matchup, if I had to guess, or at least say, something to pay attention to, Dave Clawson came out this week and said that they've only scrimmaged one time, full scrimmage, and then they had a half scrimmage, probably a situational scrimmage is what I'm assuming he means by that. Excuse me. And that's it. That's all the tackling they did during camp.
Ooh,
and
I'd like to hear that. Good God Almighty. Oh.
Yeah, and then let's switch it over to the other side, guys. Dabo Sweeney and Clemson, they've done, as far as the tackling drills and things of that nature, they stayed the same. They had 3 scrimmages. They had a situational scrimmage as well. And then they had their live drills during the week, and they had a live drill this past week. So Clemson has, been tackling the entire camp. They're kind of used to it. And let's be honest, Clemson's a very physical football team. They like to run right at you. And now Wake Forest is going to come in and, and they've had trouble stopping Clemson the last couple of years when they have been doing all the tackling. That's going to it kind of reminds me of what we saw from BYU and Navy. And because that's what Navy did. They didn't do much tackling, and we saw they couldn't tackle anybody. And now you're going to have Travis Etienne coming at you, and he's going to be coming downhill, and you got to square up and make a tackle, and you're not used to it. To me, that's the biggest concern if I'm Wake Forest in this matchup. It's not, hearing that this week, I was like, oh man, I think that's why the spread kept going up, because I think people heard that and started laying more on Clemson.
Yeah, no, I thought the spread was too high until you just told me that. Don't hurt them. That's going to be bad.
Yeah,
will be over with at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, and guys, keep in mind the last 2 years, Clemson's outscored Wake Forest 115-6.
I'll do it in the first quarter tomorrow.
They might, and Clemson's planning to rotate as many players as possible. Last year Clemson averaged 54 players played in the first quarter. And they averaged 72 players per game. So, I could see that being the situation tomorrow too. I mean, but Wake Forest does have some talent. You guys talked about Sam Hartman. I think he's a guy that can, especially with Clemson's young defensive line, can maybe do some things, especially how they run that, how they do the RPOs a little bit more different, kind of a slower pace than most schools do. That could be interesting to watch. They got a freshman wide receiver and Donovan Green. I think that's going to be an interesting matchup when you look at the other side, where Clemson's going to have a brand new starter at corner. They got 3 brand new starters in the secondary. So there's going to be some situations where I think Wake can do some things. But how much success and how much consistent success can they have against Clemson? And then also, just are they going to be able to stop Clemson's offense? And I just don't know. If you haven't tackled, that's going to be a tough challenge against Clemson.
I'm going to answer that question. No, they're not going to be able to. I believe I got my TV and time right. 8:00 kick, ABC.
7:30 kick on ABC. Yes.
All right.
Last thing I have for you, Will, as we begin to wrap this up, taking a look at the big picture this year for Clemson. Obviously, this is a program that expects to compete for not only compete for, but win national titles year in, year out at this stage. But in the ACC, do you think it will be North Carolina, Notre Dame, maybe even Louisville? Who do you think will be the Tigers' biggest challenger?
Guys, I think it's going to be North Carolina. I'm the more I look at Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame's a little overrated. I don't know if they're a top 10 team. They got too many question marks in the secondary. Their skill players don't seem to be where they need to be right now to be a top 10 kind of team. Who's going to be their running back? Yeah, they got a good offensive line. They got a good quarterback. But they got a lot of question marks at wide receiver, and they got a lot of question marks at running back. And as I mentioned, the secondary is a major concern for them. They lost 7 starters off that defense last year. I don't know. I think they'll be a good team, but I don't know if they're going to compete with North Carolina. They got to go to Chapel Hill, and I like North Carolina in that game. And I think North Carolina will be the team that plays Clemson when it's all said and done for the ACC championship. I think Louisville, though, is going to be a much improved team again. I think you saw that last year with the new coaching staff, how they got better. Won 8 games from a team that the year before won 2 games. So I think you can see them take the next step. And in an 11 game season, maybe that's still 8 wins, but 8 wins in an 11 game season is an improvement from 8 wins in a 13 game season. And then I think I think a couple other teams that could be pretty good. Virginia Tech, I think, is a team. Virginia, I really like what Bronco Mendenhall has done at Virginia and building that team because they play fundamental football. Even though they were so outclassed by Clemson from a talent standpoint, but fundamentally, if you go watch that game, their players are always in position. They're well coached, and I think when you have a coach that teaches like that, it eventually pays off in recruiting. And I see them getting better. I think they're not going to contend for the ACC title, but I think they could be a 7-8 win team this year as well. So I think there's some more depth in the ACC than there has been in years. I didn't even mention Miami. We saw them open up the season last night. I think they got a chance to be a 7-8 win team. I think the depth in the ACC this year is going to be much better than people think it's going to be. It's going to be Clemson and then about 6 or 7 other teams that I think. Pittsburgh, another team. I think that's the surprise team to keep an eye on. Their defense is nasty. Pittsburgh's defense is the only defense in the ACC this year that I think can match what Clemson does defensively. And so they're nasty up front. They led the country last year in negative plays. I think they could be a team if their offense can get going and they can get some consistency at quarterback play. I think they can be really, really good and could maybe spoil a couple things for some other teams.
Will, appreciate your time and insight on not only the Tigers, but this matchup tomorrow with Wake Forest. We'd love to have you back on the program down the road as we take a look at Clemson later on in the season.
Yeah, guys, anytime, man. And the people can check me out at the Clemson Insider. We're the Clemson Insider website, at Steeler Will on Twitter, and then Clemson Insider on Twitter as well. Those are all the ways you can find us.
All right.
Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you going ahead and plugging your stuff. I meant to go ahead and present that opportunity for you, but appreciate your time, and we'll certainly be in touch in the next few weeks.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
All right.
Kyle, one of those teams that he was talking about just a moment ago, the North Carolina Tar Heels. This next guy certainly knows a lot about beating the North Carolina Tar Heels. Last year, the App State Mountaineers went into Kenan Stadium, came out victorious in an absolute thriller. Welcome into the show, App State play-by-play, Adam Witten.
What's up, guys? Good to be with you again.
Hey, Adam.
Appreciate you being patient with us, Adam. Go ahead, Kyle.
Go ahead, Bob. Take
it. Taking a look at this game tomorrow on the 49ers and the Mountaineers getting things started up in Boone. What is it, a 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock kickoff, something like that?
12 o'clock.
12 o'clock kickoff and yeah. ESPN2, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so this is a game or a matchup, I should say, that wasn't supposed to be played until what, 2026?
Don't get all choked up about it.
No, that's what happens when you're eating while you're doing a show. But no, take a look at this matchup between the 49ers and Mountaineers. What
this is one that wasn't on the docket until 2026. Go ahead, Kyle, and can speak.
So the Mountaineers and the 49ers playing an unscheduled game. It got added. You guys played last year. The Mountaineers handled the 49ers. It's going to be in Boone tomorrow. No fans allowed. Can't even have any family members because you couldn't possibly socially distance 300 to 500 family members in a 30,000-seat stadium. That would just be impossible. So no crowd tomorrow at all to watch the Mountaineers beat the 49ers.
Yeah, that's correct. It's you take the good with the bad, I think, right now. And tomorrow we're excited that app is going to be in a really good time slot and get some good exposure on ESPN2. And the fact that these two teams are facing off again is a good thing. So you have some things that you can really get excited about if you're an App State fan, but then you kind of come crashing down to earth and realize that when the team takes the field tomorrow, just a few minutes before kickoff, there's not going to be anybody in the stands. There's not going to be any atmosphere. And anybody that's been to a game at Kid Brewer Stadium knows that it is an atmosphere that is unique. It is you can put it up there with any school in this region, certainly in this state in terms of just atmosphere. It's not as big of a stadium, but the passion is right there with anywhere else. And so the fact that they won't have that in their corner tomorrow is disappointing. But at the same time, I think it deserves a lot of applause. The fact that we are actually sitting here talking late on a Friday night, less than 24 hours from kickoff, close to 14, 15 hours from kickoff, and we're actually going to play these games. It's remarkable to think that we're there, and a lot of people deserve a lot of credit for figuring out a way to do this. App's in really good shape for tomorrow, and so fans or no fans, we are going to have a game tomorrow, and App State's going to kick off its season and continue its amazing run that it's been on the last several years.
Yeah, absolutely. New year, new head coach, third head coach in the last 3 seasons. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean it's the price of success at this level. I mean that's App State. A lot of programs are sniffing around the mountain. I mean Scott Satterfield did amazing things here, and now he's at Louisville, and Eli Drinkwitz led the program to an historic 13-1 season and another bowl win, another Sun Belt championship, and then he went off to Mizzou. And so now, you've got a guy in Sean Clark that as soon as the word got out that Drinkwitz was leaving for Missouri, the momentum, the campaign, it really started to swell around Sean Clark. This is the guy that everybody wanted. He is one of the most beloved figures in this program's history as a player in the 90s, as an assistant coach here since 2016. He's been coaching the offensive line, and not just the offensive lineman, but player to player to player. They said, we want this guy as our head coach because he represents App State culture, and it is a place that requires a unique type of personality, someone that has to fit the culture of what they have up there that makes the place so special. And so Sean Clark fits that mold, and with that, App is going to be able to build some continuity now. He's a guy that when he gets up there and he says this is a dream job for him, he's telling the truth. He's been dreaming of this opportunity for over a decade since he got into the coaching business. And so I'm excited to see his kids go out there and play hard for him, for themselves, for the rest of the staff. And, it's going to be a very similar App State team to what we saw with Scott Satterfield in terms of style. The weapons are there. The experience is there. All the pieces are in place. And I don't think just because Sean Clark is technically a new head coach, I don't think we should expect any growing pains or adjustments or transitions that you might have with breaking in a new coach.
Yeah.
Adam,
go ahead, Bubba.
Before we talk about some of those pieces that you're referencing in terms of offensive personnel or obviously a tremendous defense for the Mountaineers as well, you talk about Missouri a moment ago when you're discussing Coach Drinkwitz, a guy that has Missouri roots, has just done a tremendous job. His athletic director, Doug Gillen, I know Doug, and he did a tremendous job of salvaging this schedule. And the Mountaineers were supposed to go to Camp Randall to take on Wisconsin. They were also supposed to come down the mountain to Winston-Salem to play Wake Forest, who we were just talking about a moment ago. So just talk about the job he did of salvaging things.
It's remarkable. It really is, the fact that we got to the point that we are now with this schedule. All 4 non-conference games evaporated as a result of the pandemic. You had the game at Wisconsin, like you mentioned. Standing here today, App was scheduled to have already played 1 game at home against Morgan State, and tonight was actually supposed to be the night that App and Wake Forest were going to play in Winston-Salem. That was supposed to be on a Friday night. So all that gets wiped out, and the challenge is kind of twofold, guys. It's the challenge of the here and now, of the present, where you're scrambling to fill games in a short amount of time, which is no easy task. And then it's the challenge that nobody wants to play App State. Getting teams to schedule App State is not easy. You've got the P5 conferences, or what's left of the P5 conferences, playing games that are either playing all conference games, like the SEC, or they're playing all conference games and just 1 non-conference game, like the Big 12 and the ACC. And so you don't have a lot of options out there. You don't have a lot of calls you can make, because you got to match dates and you got to find people that don't already have something scheduled. And so when you couple that with the fact that it's already tough in any year for people to agree to play App State because of its history, it truly was a Herculean task to kind of reconstruct the schedule the way it is now. And so now you get this Charlotte game playing for the 3rd time in 3 seasons. It's become kind of a rivalry between 2 North Carolina programs at the FBS level. App has a ton of fans. It's its largest alumni base, as it is for a lot of schools in this state, in Mecklenburg County. And so you get a game featuring an opponent that the fans take an interest in. Next weekend, they're going to go and play Marshall, which is a cool throwback game to the old Southern Conference days. Another regional game, and then you're going to play another in-state opponent in Campbell for your 3rd and final non-conference game in 2 weeks. So what this schedule turned into is pretty incredible, considering what Doug Gillen and the administration was up against in terms of trying to get this figured out to build more than just a conference-only schedule, which is what they were facing for a little while.
And following up about that Marshall game very quickly, Kyle, that Marshall game, I saw on social media a ton of App State fans not being able to go to the Rock and watch their Mountaineers play, or buying up tickets in Huntington.
Yeah, that tends to happen, and not just given the circumstances now. That's going to happen for any game that App fans can drive to. We saw it in Chapel Hill last year. We saw it in Columbia against the Gamecocks. Whenever the team goes to Atlanta to play Georgia State, App's got a huge alumni base in Atlanta. And so, from Boone, it's about 3.5, 4-hour drive. From Winston-Salem, it's a 4-hour drive, maybe another hour or 2 from Charlotte. And so it is drivable for App fans in the state. And therefore they're going to go, especially if they can't get tickets to go to home games. So, we expect to see a good amount of black and gold in that stadium, which, regardless of the situation or the time of year, if it's a regional game, it's a road game, we're going to see a good amount of App fans in the stadium.
Talking about coaches, last year, Will Healy, his first year at Charlotte, year number 2. Last year, taking them to a bowl game. They beat that Marshall team you guys played last week in an upset in the pouring rain. So talk about what you guys expect from the 49ers tomorrow. I think they can give the Mountaineers a bit more of a challenge than they have in the last couple of years, though it wasn't a bad game last year.
Yeah, they're definitely trending upward, and you got to give a lot of credit to what Will Healy and that staff has done in a very short amount of time. Charlotte, people have to remember that Charlotte is still a young program. This is only year 8 for them playing football. And to go to their first bowl game, they finished the regular season winning 5 in a row to get to 7 wins and go to the postseason. So they are definitely trending upward. and certainly a game that the Mountaineers are expecting to be pushed tomorrow. The game last year, 56-41, you look at it and you think, okay, well, App ran wild on them, put up a ton of points, and they did put up a ton of points. But Charlotte was right there with them for a while. The Mountaineers could not put them away because Charlotte was able to use a quick strike, big play offense. And that's where they're going to try to tighten things up tomorrow, because Charlotte's offense has a lot of weapons. They're getting older. They're getting more experience. They're developing depth at some of their key positions, which takes time to build with a new program. And so the pieces are in place now where they feel like, as Will would say, they feel like they could turn this into a rivalry, because they got to win a game in this series for it to be a rivalry, in his words. So yeah, I mean, this I think is a really good test for both teams to start off the season, and App is certainly going into this well prepared for a fight.
Adam, earlier today, I was actually listening to a little of the Black and Gold podcast while I was jogging, and those guys were just talking about obviously the
jokers.
Yeah, exactly. The lay of the land there in Boone provides opportunities for fans to try to watch, but I know they said that there's a tremendous amount of police that are being put on that task.
Yeah, they're it's not only that fans can't be in the stadium, but they're trying to they're really doing it just because they want to prevent large crowds on campus. They're trying to follow the rules that the state has set, which is it's 50 people. Large gatherings is over 50 people, and so they're trying to eliminate those numbers. Whatever you believe, whatever you think is right and wrong in this situation, the reality is that's what Appalachian State University and all the other state schools around the area have to follow. They have to follow those guidelines, and so we can't have fans. We're not going to allow tailgating on campus. But people are going to have to get creative, and App fans will. I mean, they're going to be glued to their television, and they're going to find ways to make it as close to a normal football Saturday as the restrictions will allow. But yeah, they've got to be vigilant tomorrow, because it's not just about what's inside the stadium. They've said that tailgating is not something that'll be permitted on campus tomorrow either.
Last thing I have for you about this matchup is one that you have a couple of veteran quarterbacks.
Yeah, Zach Thomas for App is a third-year starter now. He burst onto the scene in his first start as a sophomore with the game against Penn State 2 years ago that went to overtime, and he's been incredible since day one. So he's going to go down. If he has another season this year like he's had either of the previous two, he's going to go down as an all-time great, and he probably should anyway, just because of what he and his team has accomplished over the last two seasons. So he just continues to mature. He's got so many weapons around him, 3 really talented running backs, all 5 starters returning on the offensive line, and with a ton of experience and snaps and starts, and knock on wood, that group has been healthy and been able to gel together over several years. Wide receiver has so much talent. I mean, he's got all the weapons around him to have another big year. He's working with the new offensive coordinator again in Tony Peterson, but Tony and I actually caught up a little bit earlier today, and just listening to him talk about his relationship already with Zach really makes you optimistic that Zach's going to continue to elevate his game this year. Chris Reynolds on the other side with Charlotte is he has grown year by year, and he kind of proved himself a little bit against App last season. And really kind of started to establish himself. So also a dual threat kind of guy. He can beat you with his legs. He's tough as nails, really difficult to bring down. And he also has a tremendous group of wide receivers surrounding him that will allow him to be successful. And so, yeah, the quarterback matchup is really intriguing tomorrow. I think you've got two really talented guys, and certainly ones that have tons of experience and a lot of help around them. So I think it should make for a fun offensive game.
Absolutely.
Adam, we really appreciate you joining us tonight, and definitely look forward to having you back on as we move throughout the 2020 campaign.
Yeah, guys, happy to do it anytime.
All right, thanks, Adam.
Now, going from we were talking about the Campbell Camels and how App State had added Campbell to the schedule. Welcome in from ESPN analyst Rene Ingoglia. Rene, we appreciate you rejoining the program.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. Sorry for being on late. As you can see, I'm on my iPhone holding it here, so hopefully I can hold it steady. But I'm in Statesboro, Georgia. Had a few things to do tonight, but just got back to the hotel, so I'm glad I could jump on and join you guys.
Absolutely. We know you're certainly busy preparing for tomorrow's call. Really appreciate you spending some time with us. And so just talk about the scene there in Statesboro and what's the latest with the Eagles as it pertains to COVID.
Yeah, so I tell you guys, for the first time in a long time, like things feel normal for me. I mean, other than wearing a mask and social distancing, just getting on the road, getting to Statesboro, checking in my hotel, going through my game notes. We met with coaches today, social distance, wore a mask, but it was just great talking football. Like everyone else, Georgia Southern's ready to go, right? They just want to get going. It hasn't been easy, guys. It's not going to be easy, I don't think, for any program this year. I think with COVID, with everything going on, teams and conferences are just going to have to push through. They have a pretty extensive inactive list, and I think that's what most schools are doing. We'll be getting an inactive list. That'll be a combination of probably kids that could be COVID positive, contact tracing, which is the big issue, other injuries, so forth and so on. So we'll get one big list, and Georgia Southern is no different. They'll be down a good amount of guys tomorrow. But they're going to push through. Again, I think this year more than any, coaches are really going to earn their salaries across the country because no time in our lifetime in college football will your second team, will your third team, and probably in some instances your fourth team players are going to be called upon to step up and play, and they're going to have to really have that next man up mentality. So I know Georgia Southern's going to have a pretty good sized number of inactives tomorrow. I believe Campbell only a couple, so not affected as much. And talking to Mike Minter this week too, they're excited to play too. Only a 4-game season, all FBS opponents, all on the road. So that's kind of fascinating for them. Tomorrow will be the first time ever in program history that Campbell will be on national television. So I'm looking for a fun game tomorrow.
Yeah, no doubt. How many fans are allowed there in Statesboro?
Yep. So they're allowing 6,250. It's a 25,000 seat stadium. So I think that'll be a pretty good ambiance, pretty good atmosphere. They are allowing they're one of the programs that it's allowing tailgating. I think social distance and the whole 9 yards separated, but they are ready to go here in Statesboro. And so for all intents and purposes, it'll be normal football for the most part.
One thing I've noticed, I don't know if ESPN is miking the crowds or if I have just forgotten what loud real people sound like, because last night, watching Miami and UAB and watching some of these other games with these, quarter-sized houses, 50,000 seat stadiums with 12,000 people, the people sound loud.
Yeah.
Is ESPN miking the crowds?
No, they are not. So the crowd you heard last night is the crowd. I mean, I'm sure the audio people can turn it up, turn it down, obviously, but there's no manufactured crowd noise that I know of that's being pumped in. Now I know, Monday night at Navy, they had nobody in the crowd. So,
right.
that was kind of hard to deal with. But, Miami last night, as you said, the NFL game actually sounded great. So if you can have some ambiance in there, like 6,200 fans here in Statesboro, I mean, they're going to be pretty loud. I mean, you'll hear them. There'll be some band members in there as well. So we're excited just to kind of, to push through and move forward.
On a national scale, Rennie, what games are you looking forward to tomorrow?
Just, I guess, the ACC games, right? Because tomorrow's the first time we're going to have Power 5 versus Power 5. So the SU North Carolina game intrigues me. Basically all those matchups. Duke, Notre Dame. I mean, how does that not intrigue you, right? Notre Dame's first game in a conference. And I'll be interesting to see how David Cutcliffe's bunch plays on the road up there in South Bend. So, and that's the thing, guys, the craziness with this season is you don't know how teams have been practicing, right? You don't know how the rhythm's going to be. I mean, thank God I'm not a gambler, because I would have never in a million years thought BYU would have did that to Navy. I don't think anybody did, and just shocked.
Well.
And then Ken Niumatalolo comes out and says, "Hey, we weren't really tackling." I can tell you what, after that game, every defensive coordinator, every head coach in the country was making sure their team was tackling. So I just think that there's so much unknown this season, but it kind of makes it a little more intriguing as well.
Rennie, I picked up the phone and called Bubba right before kickoff of that Navy BYU game, and I said, I just heard Navy did not practice tackling. They didn't go live. No wrapping up, no hitting at all fall camp. And I said, BYU 240, Navy 0.
And it was pretty close. You were pretty close. I mean, and I felt bad because Navy's a good program, and I've done them a lot. And, that was not a true depiction of that program. But I tell you what, they took it on the chin. But they'll fight back. And knowing Ken Niumatalolo and that group of guys, they'll fight back.
Yeah, I actually think that after not being live all fall camp, probably getting that physical matchup from BYU, who's a very physical football team, was probably the best thing for them.
No, I agree. And so now I think you see a little, I guess, worriedness out of some programs. And the thing I'm learning, guys, and you probably know this already, but as you look at program across the country, it's not the positive COVID tests. It's the contact tracing that goes with it, because you may have 2 kids, let's say, that are COVID positive, but there might be 15 other kids that were next to them or associated with them by position or by apartment that they're living in or dorm. And all of a sudden, those 15 kids that have no symptoms, that are testing negative each and every day, or when they're having a test, they're out for 14 days. So I think that is the hardest thing for these programs. And then, you may have a game coming up, and you may, fit the requirements that your conference says that you need to play the game, but you may be without 3 tight ends, let's say. I mean, and no coach wants to go in a game depleted at any position. So it is really going to be kind of a chess match, the game within the game. Roster management for head coaches is going to be the biggest thing that it's ever been before in college football. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, we had reportedly back in August, which caused our game. When I say we, I mean East Carolina, which caused the game with Marshall to be, pushed back to the end of the season. Hopefully, we were supposed to play this weekend on the 12th. We had our reportedly 11 positive cases, and it ended up being 30 kids being quarantined because of contact tracing. So you're right. It's a problem, and I don't want to get in the weeds too much about what protocol is. But it just doesn't make any sense to me. It seems like after 7 days, if you're still testing negative, that you should be able to come out of that.
I agree with you 100%. The crazy thing is, you could have COVID. You could test positive and get back quicker than a kid that doesn't have it because they're quarantined with contact tracing. So to me, that's kind of nuts. I mean, you would hope they would be able to adjust that, but guys, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, and one thing, Rennie, speaking on a national scale, and we mentioned this earlier on the show with with Lane's play-by-play guy. One thing I haven't heard anybody talk about, and maybe we don't know at this point, but you working for ESPN, I believe there's 42 bowl games now in the FBS. So that's 84 teams, and there's 76 teams playing FBS football. So is everybody going to go to a bowl this year?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. I think some bowls have already bowed out. I mean, I don't know. I think I remember hearing some of that. Okay. I just kind of think they're kind of on a wait and see, right? Like, and which is smart. I don't think you cancel anything until you absolutely have to. And I think the Big Ten is learning that lesson right now. I mean, they're learning it every single day.
They'll be playing by Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, so and that's another thing too. Do they come back? Are they able to start playing by? If they can realistically, and I'm an eternal optimist. If you ever, anyone that follows me on Twitter knows I'm a positive person, and I think our country, we don't cower in the corner no matter what in this country. That's why it's so great. We fight and we push through. I mean, risk calculation. That's what we do each and every day. But if the Big Ten doesn't about face, and let's say start up next week, I mean, they can essentially start their season October 10th. and still be included in everything. I mean, guys, in the American, Temple does not start their season till October 10th. And obviously they're still going to be involved in everything. So, and to get back to your question, I think kind of the bowl games are sitting out there kind of waiting too. They don't really know at the end of the day who's all going to be playing. And I guess if there's not enough teams at that time, they bow out and say we can't have a bowl game.
I really believe what you're going to see is probably I think you potentially will see the NCAA just allow the bowls to take who they want to, and I think you can see some 3 or 4 win teams in bowls this year. I really do.
Listen, this is going to be a crazy, unusual year, so nothing would surprise me. I mean, heck, they wanted to do right. They're proposing an NCAA basketball tournament with every single team. So anything's open.
No, absolutely, and it's strange times. Other games of interest tomorrow to me, anyway, personally. One that I got circled because they've already played a game, and I think they're a pretty talented football team, and they look well at times against Memphis. Arkansas State playing Kansas State tomorrow. K-State haven't played yet.
Yep.
That game intrigues me. I could see an upset there in Manhattan.
I did a game in Jonesboro last year. Blake Anderson, very good coach, well-coached team, great program, and you're right. I think the fact that they have a game under their belt, obviously been hitting and tackling, and listen, that's when you can catch a team like a Kansas State. So yeah, that's a very intriguing game as well. I would agree with you there. That is one that Kansas State cannot go to sleep on whatsoever. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one as well.
Yeah, Bubba, you got any games you want to mention already?
Yeah, another one to keep an eye on involving a Sun Belt team is you have the Raging Cajuns going out to Ames, Iowa, to take on Iowa State, who some people were, expecting to push Oklahoma and Texas right there at the top of the Big 12. So what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, and guys, in the beginning of the seasons, that's when we see those upsets, and there's no doubt about it. So Louisiana's a team I had 2 times, I think maybe even 3 times last year. I was in the Sun Belt a lot last year. So that's another one of those programs like in Arkansas State. They ran the heck out of the football last year. Their quarterback's back. He's a dynamic player. So yeah, those Big 12 teams, they better be ready to play. And that's another interesting thing, guys, with the leagues, the conferences we have playing and the teams we have playing. And I said this on a few different shows, the American and the Sun Belt, their TV windows are really elevated now. I mean, they're going to get some real good national exposure. And so it'll be really interesting how these programs, if they can take advantage of it, knocking off a big team in a prime time type of window in a big time slot.
Yeah, I mentioned that yesterday to somebody about 2 Sun Belt teams. All right, one of them was Arkansas State. Arkansas State played ESPN primetime against Memphis Saturday night. Now they're going to turn around to this week and play on Fox, not FS1, but Fox Network TV. Texas State, who I think I've seen one Texas State game on ESPNU.
Last week. E2, yeah.
Yeah, they were on ESPN against SMU last week and on ESPN2 against UTSA this week.
Yeah, and I've been to San Marcos, Texas. I did an E3 game. Speaking to that, they were on ESPN3 a bunch. Early on in my career, I went to San Marcos and did a game. But you're right. I mean, huge opportunities for players, number one, that maybe aren't household names that you haven't heard of that can go out there and do something. And all of a sudden, they're on national TV. Their highlights are on ESPN and the different shows. And then, again, it elevates the program and it elevates the conference. So it's definitely a win-win for the conference and the individual programs within those conference, I think, for the Sun Belt big time and the American as we move forward.
Yeah, no doubt. And obviously East Carolina guys here. So the American Conference is a conference we keep up with a lot. The college game day tomorrow, maybe you can fill us in on this. We were trying to figure it out. They said they're going to be, live from Winston-Salem. Are they actually going to Winston-Salem with no fans allowed?
Yeah, my understanding is they are. They're all traveling. I don't think Coach Corso's traveling. I think he'll be digital, if you will, from Orlando. He lives in Lake Mary area in Orlando. So I think he'll be on through a home studio, but I believe everybody else will be on site. But yeah, no fans. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, it's my understanding game day will be traveling each and every week. So it'll be interesting. And so the other thing, guys, too, is hopefully listen, I look at the COVID numbers like you guys probably do, and they're going in the right direction in the country. There's no doubt about it. I mean, in Florida, which is a quote unquote hotspot in the country, I watch those numbers religiously, and I got two girls that play high school sports, so they're definitely going in the right direction. So, my hope is as we, get into October that boom, all of a sudden we can get the fan capacity up a little bit, and then maybe we can get some fans in for game day. And as we get into November, and I think getting back to the other question about bowl games too, I think they're all in college football playoff. I think they're holding out that hopefully by December we can have fans in there and more fans for bowl games and in the playoffs. So I think that's what everyone's really hoping for, but we're kind of all beholden to the virus.
No doubt. Bobby, you got anything for Rene?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Rene as far as taking a look at some of the ACC teams in action. We've had some of these beat writers and play-by-play voices and so forth on the show earlier, but we were talking to Cameron Teague of the Louisville Courier Journal. Scott Satterfield did such a tremendous job there last year in his first year in Louisville. Also, obviously, Clemson is supposed to be Clemson. They're taking on Wake Forest tomorrow. North Carolina is expected to contend. And then probably not necessarily teams that are going to be contenders, but you have Mike Norvell making his debut with Florida State, taking on Jeff Collins and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in what probably should be a pretty competitive game.
Yeah, and I'm a big Mike Norvell fan. I've done a ton of Memphis games in my time, and I just, I think it's really tough for new coaches this year. I mean, you step in and you're not only dealing with COVID, but you have the social justice issues that you're dealing with. And so Mike Norvell, came into Florida State and there was so much going on. So it'll be really interesting to see how his team responds and how they play, not only this week, but this season. So I just think if you're a new coach, boy, you are kind of behind the eight ball just with so much going on. But knowing Mike Norvell, knowing what kind of person he is, what kind of coach he is, he's going to turn things around there in Tallahassee. I'm convinced of that. So it'll be interesting, the ACC in a whole, because let's face it, guys, last year, Clemson was Clemson, right? They were phenomenal, but everybody else in the ACC was just kind of just a couple steps back. I think this year, a lot of those schools you mentioned, Louisville being one of them. I think Virginia Tech's a team that's going to be a lot better this year. A lot of teams taking steps forward. And I think adding Notre Dame was a real big deal. Pittsburgh was a team I did last year in their bowl game. I think they're better this year. You mentioned North Carolina. So I think the ACC in entirety, I think took a step forward, or should take a step forward this year as a conference. Again, with COVID and what you just don't know how practices have gone for teams. And I mean, that's the $1 million question. How is the rhythm? How is the timing? And I think that's another thing that kind of hurts first-year coaches taking over programs. They didn't have a spring. It's a new system for those programs. So it'll be really interesting to see how these teams respond. But yeah, that Florida State is one that I'm really going to keep my eye on.
Rene, you mentioned social justice issues, and you have a unique perspective being a law enforcement officer. You care to comment on that?
Sure. I'm a big First Amendment guy. I am always for people to speak out and have a voice. And I think it's phenomenal that the college athletes, not just football players, it's been all college athletes, have come together and have spoke on their platform and got out there. And I love that and I applaud it. But as you said, I've been in football locker rooms and I've been in quote unquote a police locker room, if you will, because I've been a cop for 20 years. So I see every side of it. The only thing that I ask people to do, and the elephant in the room is obviously police actions, right? Every incident across the country is unique to itself. It's not one incident, and all those incidents have to be investigated accordingly. And I was an internal affairs investigator for 2.5 years. I mean, I've investigated police shootings, and I know what goes into them. And so what I would tell people is facts matter, details matter, and things take time. And so I caution people to be careful about speaking about individual incidents that happen when you don't know the facts. I will never people ask me all the time about certain police incidents, and I said, I can't give you an opinion, because as an investigator, I would want to dive into things. I would want to see specific things as an investigator. So I think, that part can be really dangerous. And I will say this, and I think I've said this to you guys before. When a police officer breaks the law, he needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. With that said, there's police officers out there that do their job to the best of their ability, and they make mistakes, just like everybody does in everyday life in their job. And when they make those mistakes, they need to be investigated accordingly. And if it's a mistake that can be rectified and they can be fixed, and if they deserve punishment, they should get that punishment. And if they belong to stay on, and if they deserve to stay on as an officer, then they need to. But if they need to be terminated, that needs to happen too. And so that kind of goes back to what I said about, sometimes the investigations take time. So that's all. But I am all for people to get on their platforms. And I'll say this too, guys. One thing I think in our country that somehow we've gotten away from, and it's kind of disturbing to me, is we can agree to disagree on some topics, right? I mean,
oh, God, yes.
But still respect each other, right? We can respect someone's opinion if it's not the same as ours, and not say, well, now I hate this person, I'm never going to talk to you again. That's crazy. So we need to get back to saying, hey, I might not agree with your opinion, but I understand where you're coming from, and I respect it, and I will fight for your ability to say that opinion. And let's still get along, and let's, and that's why sports usually brings this country together, and I hope it does, and it has the ability to do it. And so, and I think communication is big. And the other thing I think that these movements have done, these social justice movements, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, is a lot of us need to just stop and listen, right? And that's, a lot of people just want to say what they feel, because we all have different feelings, and we have to listen. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think this movement, especially with the college athletes, I think it is helping, and it's going in the right direction. So I applaud it.
Rene, I appreciate what you do as a law enforcement officer. I know, right now, a lot of people are painting with broad strokes, and it's just want to make like all cops are bad, and that just is so far from the truth. So you guys are out there putting your lives on the line every day. So appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
Well, Rene, we certainly appreciate you spending so much time with us, and we know you need to continue prepping for tomorrow's game.
Right.
So 3:30.
Pronunciations, guys, pronunciations. You can't mess them up. That'll get you in trouble more than anything with parents, right? Yeah, 3:30 Eastern Time, ESPNU. Listen, I'm excited. Mike Minter, two-time national champion at Nebraska, played 10 years, Carolina Panthers. I'm excited to watch his bunch. They're ready to play. So I think they might surprise Georgia Southern just a little bit. What's that?
So the boys from Boys Creek going to pull off the upset.
I'm not going to go there, but I think they're ready to play. I think they're excited. And I think they're going to tackle. I can tell you that. So I think they've been hitting a lot. So it should be fun.
Now, Rene, since you brought up pronunciations, very quickly, I have to ask, how many games, if any, have you done for BYU over the years?
So I did one last year, and it is by far the toughest school to call. There's no doubt about it. And so you can usually always piggyback off the play-by-play guy, because he says it and you say it the right way. But if he's wrong, then you're both screwed. So you gotta make sure he's right. But that is one thing in all seriousness. And I was just doing it before I jumped on with you guys. Is going through the game notes, and then what I'll do is I write them out phonetically on my board to make sure. Now, luckily in Campbell and Georgia Southern, nothing crazy. I should be good. I don't think I think maybe I wrote one out phonetically, but yeah, when you get a BYU or Hawaii, forget about it. It is a nightmare. Great players, just tough names.
Yes.
And very quickly, one of our viewers is chiming in. He wants your opinion on whether it should be ECU or East Carolina.
I'm either or. It doesn't matter. I mean,
as long as it's not Eastern Carolina.
Correct.
And he
yeah.
says E Carolina. Can we get that fixed on ESPN? Whether it's
so you want to laugh.
ECU?
So whenever I do an ECU game or East Carolina, they always come in and ask us to fix the bug. But that comes from Bristol. That's like a contractual thing out of Bristol. The truck won't change it. So it's weird. You know who fought it forever in the American was UCF, right? Because it was Central Florida, and they fought to be called UCF. And finally, guys, they're UCF on everything. So ECU just needs to keep fighting, right? Keep fighting and keep winning, and all of a sudden it'll be ECU. So, yeah, that's one of those weird things on the bug that's easily changeable, but they don't do it.
Enjoy your weekend, Rennie. We certainly look forward to tomorrow's call. Your first of the season, and we look forward to having you back on sometime soon.
Sounds good, guys. Sorry I was late. It's always great visiting with you.
Thanks, Rennie.
All right, guys.
All right, Kyle. So some tremendous guests tonight. I really enjoyed this program, taking a look at tomorrow's action. 21 games on the docket, and you've already said a lot of the games that you're keeping an eye on, games like Iowa State and Lafayette, and then also, of course, Arkansas State traveling out to Manhattan to take on Kansas State.
Yeah, definitely. I think Kansas State has a chance to be upset tomorrow by Arkansas State. Also, you mentioned Georgia Tech and Florida State should be a good one. Charlotte, App, man, there's just I was really big on App, and I get hunches sometimes, and just I got a hunch during this broadcast that Charlotte's going to win that game tomorrow. So there's nothing to base that on. That's just one of my weird hunches that normally, I'm not doing a broadcast when I get one, so I can say it and I would keep it to myself. But I just got a hunch that Charlotte's going to pull the upset off tomorrow, and I hope I'm wrong. Because, I'll be pulling for App, full transparency. But I got a hunch.
Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen. Like you're saying, several very close App State friends of mine, they would be very unhappy campers, to say the least. It would make for some interesting conversations for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And it'll be a fun day tomorrow to see as close to a normal day of college football as we've had. We had week 0 with the one FCS game, and last week you had a handful of games. So it won't be a normal slate tomorrow, but it'll seem that way with the TV coverage. It'll be a normal TV slate, basically.
And speaking of coverage, join us either late Saturday night or Sunday morning, as we'll once again have our college football playback. We'll take a look back at obviously that Thursday night game with Miami taking down UAB last night 31-14 in a game where it seemed as though the Hurricanes just kind of warmed down as the game went along. And like you said, not a whole lot of action going on in that second half. It's not uncommon for me to fall asleep anyway, with me getting up pretty early. But yeah, last night's game certainly wasn't going to keep me awake.
No, I turned it off with probably 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and said, time to go to bed. This is boring. I think Coach Houston said he fell asleep during the game also. So I think a lot of people did. But the Canes got the W. So, join us for our playback as we wrap up the week that was in college football late Saturday night, or like Bubba said, he has a tendency to fall asleep, so it'll probably be Sunday morning as we look back at the day that was in college football. And I guess the late game tomorrow, Bubba, is going to be Kansas and Coastal Carolina, your typical late game between a team from the East Coast and a team from the Heartland. But at least there'll be something on late. That's interesting. I originally liked Kansas big in that game, but sounds like they lost a lot of players off their defense. So could be interesting.
Yeah, definitely so. And Kansas has revenge on its mind for sure. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Puka Williams tote the rock tomorrow night out at Memorial Stadium. And like you said, 10 o'clock kickoff on FS1. And we'll be very interested to see how that one plays out in game 1 of year 2 of the Les Miles era. But if you don't have anything else, we'll go ahead and get out of here. We appreciate you tuning in. One of our loyal viewers and listeners, and Johnny Gardner chiming in. Good show, informative guest across the board, Johnny. We appreciate that. Just episode 2 of the Inside Slant, and this is something we definitely plan on doing as we move throughout the college football season. Look forward to having a Pirate flavor to it. Certainly here in a couple weeks with UCF coming to Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium in front of 0 fans, but who knows? Maybe the ranked Knights will get upset that day, assuming they take care of business against Georgia Tech and are still ranked when they come to town. Yeah, no doubt. And for our viewers and listeners, let us know as we do this going forward. Obviously, we'll be including East Carolina in on the preview, but if you'd like to see more regional media members, representations of teams from the ACC, et cetera, or you'd like to see more conference members represented, or just whatever the big games are nationally. No doubt. And to do that, as you see there at the bottom of the screen scrolling right now, you can reach out to us at our email, thesportsobj@gmail.com. Again, thesportsobj@gmail.com. If you're on Twitter, reach out to us there at the Sports OBJ. And then on Instagram, it's also at the Sports Objective. But if you don't have Justin Butts chiming in as we're about to sign off here, he said, let's get Coach Ruff back on the program. Justin Butts, of course, talking about NC State's one of NC State's newest hires, in addition to Dave Doran's staff. Still can't get over that, but happy for Ruff, even though he's wearing red and white now. But maybe we'll have Coach Ruff back sometime during the college football season. But if you don't have anything else, Kyle, we'll go ahead and get out of here. We appreciate you tuning in. You've been watching the Sports Objective Podcast and the Inside Slant on Facebook Live and YouTube. Until next time, go Pirates.